did kind of a Q&A up there. The attendance here is good. I think someone said it's bigger than last year, so that's a nice sign.
So, Mr. DeWitt, you have not been in a situation like this before. What are your feelings heading into this season on your ball club?
I'm excited. I think, Heim and his group have really done a good job, and, we've got a good young core and young players, which always has been exciting to me. I think some of you have known me for a while. I always sort of look ahead. I follow all the minor league scores every day, and so it's exciting. I think we're going to have a fun year and look forward to it.
Bill, what would you want fans to know about the situation with FanDuel Sports right now and kind of where things are with the RSN and what you imagine the broadcast looks like this season?
Yeah, I mean, from an internal business standpoint, it's fairly disruptive in the sense that we're trying to figure out whether we do another deal with FanDuel Sports and have the status quo, albeit at a revised rights arrangement, or move over to MLB Media, which a number of teams have done when their RSN situations have fallen apart. Both options are on the table still. I think, it's a lot of work. Anook's over here. We've been triaging this situation for a while, and now for the second year in a row. Having said that, from a fan standpoint, there shouldn't be much disruption at all, because obviously if we stay on FanDuel, it's literally status quo in terms of all the games being on the same channel. There's a direct-to-consumer option that people first had last year, they'll have next year, and we're going to have some over-the-air games. So if we do move over to MLB Media, the only thing different for a fan would just be, which channel we're on. So I don't think that's something for fans to be concerned about at all. But, obviously the behind-the-scenes situation is one that we're, really paying a lot of attention to, and scenario planning and doing lots of stuff.
If you all were to transition to MLB Media, is there a possibility the games would be even more accessible in terms of carriage agreements and being able to maybe come to those with whether it's YouTube TV? I know some of the other providers don't have access to that right now. Is that something that you all are considering as part of that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think both Main Street Sports, which is the parent company of the FanDuel Sports Networks, and MLB Media are doing as good a job as they can with distribution. I think probably distribution looks pretty similar in both cases, but for example, both of them would love to get games on additional platforms. YouTube TV comes to mind as an example of one you'd love to be on if they can work out an arrangement. I mean, we're a step removed from those kinds of negotiations, but we're rooting for whoever we're with to get increased distribution and onto different distribution platforms.
Rebuilding can be trying, can be difficult. It doesn't promise anything. What would you guys consider success? How will you gauge success for 2026?
Well, that's a good question. Obviously, if some of the young guys that are coming up play well and improve, and you never know going into a season how it's going to turn out. So, it's hard to quantify to say what would success be. Obviously, we're building, and success is a winning season, and getting our core to do well.
Along those lines, do you feel like success this season might be something that you almost have to view in the future? When you look back on it, this will have been a success if things happen later on?
It's hard to say into the future what looking back would result in success. But, I think Heim's done a really good job in building a core group of players that, have nice futures ahead of them. So that's including this coming year. So you never know in baseball, how things are going to work out. But I'm excited. I think, I think the path we're on is the right one, and I think we'll do well.
Bill, you've been through decades of both the baseball but also the business of baseball. What's your feel for the upcoming labor negotiations? We see the examples just in the past week of the big city teams being the ones that are able to and willing to spend on free agents. Do you feel things are coming to a head? Does this look like one of the bigger defining labor discussions, even of your time as an owner?
I don't know what to say about that other than, we've sort of been in this situation for quite some time where there's a fair amount of disparity. So I think, most teams would prefer to have less disparity, and, that would be the goal. So I know that it's kind of is what it is, and we'll do the best we can in terms of being very competitive.
Do you think a significant, this is a question for both of you, do you think there needs to be some significant change in the landscape to allow a market like this size to compete consistently?
Are you talking about the new labor agreement?
Yes, sir.
I'm sure it'll be addressed in the labor agreement. I'm not going to really comment on, where it's headed or where I think it should head, but obviously, I think the majority of baseball people like, some parity, and hopefully we'll see it this year. Maybe we won't. We'll see.
Yeah, I would just add that competitive balance is a huge issue. Obviously, probably Commissioner's primary issue going into the agreement, and the ways in which you can achieve that are multiple. So, I think players probably have a sense that that's a major concern for them. If you're a player on a team that has no chance, that's no fun either. So, and the fans are in that same boat. So, I would say a little more to the point that I do think it's a key labor agreement, probably one of the more significant ones that we've experienced, just because that disparity has exacerbated over the years.
Mr. DeWitt, with Ollie Marmol going into last year of his current contract, as manager, how do you kind of go about, evaluating what kind of his role looks like in sort of this year and just kind of like you said, those young players kind of taking a step forward for the future?
Well, I think Ollie's done a good job. Our view is that he's done a very good job, and we'll sit down and talk about his future. And I'm sure Chaim was asked that question as well, so I'll defer to his answer. But anyway, we think Ollie's done an excellent job, and so we'll go from there.
Bill, after 2 decades of working with the same person at the head of baseball operations, what's the difference in working with Chaim day to day versus working with Mo day to day? How have you seen things be different, feel different, look different, just from a workflow perspective?
Yeah, each GM or head of baseball ops, has their own style, their own priorities, et cetera. So no two are going to be the same. Mo was with us a long time. We had a lot of success. Chaim's, helped the last couple of years, and, this is his first real, term in charge. So far so good. But, each of them has their own way of doing things and priorities. So we're optimistic. We think Chaim's going to do a great job.
In the last 5 or 6 years or so in baseball, the amount of cash that you all are sending out this year to pay salaries outside the organization, I think is the second largest behind the year the Mets divested from Verlander and Scherzer. What was kind of the decision process behind making that acceptable for you all, for that being a stance you were willing to take? And where do you hope that gets you in terms of making that dollar commitment now and what it looks like for the future?
Well, we could have saved some of that money had we not gotten players back that we wanted. So, we made the decision to, move on from some of the more expensive players and try to get younger and build to the future, including this year. So, we had that choice. We could have, not paid as much to move some of the players, but then we wouldn't have gotten back the talent that we got. So, we really were in a position where I think it worked out really well. We've got a bunch of good young players coming back, and really some of them starting their major league careers. So, that was the goal.
The Cardinals have always taken pride in competing, not rebuilding. What was the reaction when maybe Chaim came to you guys and said it's time to rebuild? Was that something that you understood, you knew it was time, or was that kind of a shock to the system?
Well, when you say rebuild, it's build. I don't know about rebuild, but Chaim's a draft and development GM or president of baseball ops. His history with Tampa Bay was really good. The Red Sox made some great moves there, and we're on the same page with what he plans to do, which is, build, don't give up draft choices, try to accumulate draft choices. And, it could take some time, hopefully not long. And, we're excited.
Is there an understanding among you guys that once the young players are developed, then you then will look to get free agents of a higher caliber or make trades for players of a higher caliber as it all comes together?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of an obvious way that it plays out. We'll see what we need and how we go about getting it. But, I think number one goal at the moment is to get some of these young players active and playing and, go from there. Our system's good. I mean, I'm sure you guys read Baseball America. They had us number one. Not advocating and saying that's true, but they did, and we do have a good system. Got some good young players coming, so it's exciting.
Well, you talk about being excited about young players. Is that the message for the fans too, to kind of buy into the build that you're going to start this year?
That's my message, yeah. I don't know if you have a comment on that.
Well, look, our fans are smart. I've heard some things this weekend already that many of the fans are glad that our strategy has clarified and is very focused, and it's very intentional. I think you could argue that the last couple of years were a challenge in terms of our strategic approach because of where we were in the competitive cycle and where we were from a roster construction standpoint, call it, quote, in between or whatever you want to call it. But there's none of that at the moment. We're very focused on what we're doing. Our strategy is evident in the moves that were made already this offseason, and perhaps there may be some more. But there's a sense of, I don't know, refreshingness about that. Not sure that's a word, but there's a sense of relief that we've embraced the clarity of it and are doing everything we can in support of that strategy.
With that said, with an uncertain television package and with the attendance figures not what they used to be, how much more difficult is your job now?
It's a lot more difficult. It's much easier and frankly more fun to be riding an upward wave. But it's also something that I think I'll look back on and appreciate having gone through from an experiential standpoint, from a industry knowledge standpoint. We've been in this a long time. This is our 31st season coming up. We've bucked some trends for many, many years. Now we're in a cycle that is a little different. Again, I think I'll look back on it and appreciate having had it, the experience, but right now it's not super fun. Having said that, you always focus on the things that you can control and not try to worry too much about the things you can't. And I just know that our team that we have internally, both on the business side and the baseball side, nobody's having any pity parties. We're working extremely hard. We love being in this business. We love the fan feedback. We try to understand it when it's negative and seek to do things to make it swing positive. And that relates to all the things that we're doing, whether it's planning for the upcoming season on a game day standpoint, our local media situation, on the team side. Just had meetings last week on how we're going to market, this club and rethink how we present the game day experience and communicate that to fans. So there's just a lot of work going on behind the scenes, a lot of excitement. We have some young staff on the business side too, who come in and, don't think about things maybe the way we used to, and that's refreshing as well. So I'm pretty energized. I'm excited on both the business and baseball side, but it's not to say that it's been super easy. We've had to rethink it. Anuk's here. He has come from a team that has seen a cycle or two, and that experience and those fresh eyes, and same with Haim. That's been helpful to us to think through, where we are in this journey and how we can get to a better place.
Will the competitive cycle impact? I heard you talking in the Q&A about some of the improvements coming in coming years as far as ADA, and you've talked broadly about kind of what the physical plant needs to, what those changes might need to look like. How does that inform or not the competitive cycle?
I would say it's related, but not necessarily directly linked. We are dealing with a stadium that's 20 years old, and it's served us incredibly well. We plan on being here for a long, long time. I've joked to people that I don't want to be around when we have to build another one, because getting through that build process was, like a real pain and a multi-year hassle. But it all turned out fine, and we're committed to this building, this location, the city. But we're going to have to do a project that is multifaceted at some point here in the near future. And so that time frame is dictated more by just the realities and the physical realities of things than it is the competitive cycle. But, you'd love to time it up. I mean, sure, if we're, a huge playoff contender and a likely deep October type of team, you'd love for that to coincide with stadium renovations and, you kind of get the flywheel going. But I don't think they're directly linked.
Is there a timeline that you'd like to see as far as the physical plant?
Yeah, I mean, sooner rather than later, but that has some challenges. I mean, we have to understand a little bit more about this state bill that was passed last year that was intended to keep the Chiefs and the Royals, but that we might be able to piggyback on as well. Obviously, the Chiefs news was big off-season news. The Royals are still working through their situation. I think, that'll all play out before we dive into figuring out how we finance a Part 2.0 Busch Stadium number 3.
Bill, we've seen many franchises here over the last generation or so kind of transition from folks of your generation maybe to folks of Bill's in terms of who was the control person, who was running things kind of on a day-to-day basis. How much are you all willing to share publicly about what the long-term future for your family looks like in terms of stewardship of the franchise? And what does that process look like here over the next however many years you need to make it set up the way that you want it to?
Well, our families, and I'll count my father in this, been in baseball a long time. and I think it will continue. I mean, that's the plan. Obviously, I'm getting to an age where I'm not going to be around forever. Bill III is at a perfect age to continue on for a long time. So, you know, that's our goal. We're, you know, baseball people and third generation here and probably fourth underneath him coming along somewhere. So, you know, we're here.
Bill III, I don't know what and you guys are both up there.
Eye contact.
You all have been really candid through the years that payrolls tied to ticket sales, and then you had the TV deal come along at a time where it could supplement and maybe even boost or rocket some of the spending. Both of those revenue streams have changed significantly. You used the phrase disruption. Is this a hiccup, or is this a sign that new revenue streams have to be found, that those aren't the well springs that they once were?
I don't know that that requires sort of like a direct answer at the moment, because what we're doing strategically on the baseball side is driven by baseball concerns primarily. And yes, we're trying to manage some revenue challenges in a couple big areas. But, I think right now, you know, we're just working towards a point where we can see the team start to come out of this current level and get to another level. And at that point, I have no doubt that we will be in a position to bolster that effort with whatever means we need to do so. And we're already doing that, making significant investments in player development and other things that will help even this year. But they'll really help in the future as you come out of this. So I don't know. It's a bit of an evasive question, but we've shown in the past that when we have teams that have been very competitive and have high hopes for deep October runs, we've done everything we can to augment our probability of that, getting us to the promised land.
I guess I'm not, will those revenue streams be there in the future? Like, clearly TV is changing, and 2028 might see something completely new for the entire league. Do some of the ways that teams have traditionally built themselves, got their revenue, are those changing?
Well, on the ticket revenue side, I think it's self-evident that as we improve, the tickets sales will improve. On the TV side, it's not quite as linked, and I think you point out 2028, which is the year that is sort of the last year of the current national TV package configuration. We saw with the NBA last year that when they synchronized all of their national TV packages, they were able to go to market and do very well on a reset and a new structure for their national packages. I don't think it's any secret that MLB's shooting for a similar type of result. And, should that occur, that would help all the teams, and including us. Now, what happens to local media during all of that? That's kind of honestly a topic of significant discussion among all the teams. There still will obviously be the local media packages like we're seeing now. But right now we're sort of in this hybrid of still linear cable, and a lot of people are still subscribers to the bundle, although that number's been in decline. There's the direct-to-consumer option for people that they can pay monthly and get it. And then there's some over-the-air games. I don't know what the future holds with local media, but I could probably bet that it'll be different. But predicting what that looks like and, whether we can sort of come out of it revenue-wise, turn this thing around, certainly hopeful, and I would say cautiously optimistic that we will.
One last question, just so we've got players lined up to keep the room and schedule on track here for
for Bill, or Bill, if anybody has one last question. Thank you.
Bill, from a timing perspective, this is all worked out in terms of the reset and everything. Was this going to be necessary no matter what because of the TV deal, the ticket sales, everything? Like, were you going to have to divest from some of these larger contracts regardless?
Well, I would say the answer to that is no, because we didn't know that, for example, the local media situation would be this volatile. It happens to have been that way, but there wasn't like 3 years ago a strategy where we were like, oh, well, we're going to have to do this because these revenue streams are going down. I mean, we're sort of not in that level of insight on the future from a...
I just meant in terms of the timing of this now happening. Once you know you're not going to have that same local revenue stream, would it have been necessary to trade some of the bigger contracts from your books in order to make it work financially for the team this year?
I think it's a bit hypothetical because honestly, a bigger revenue stream is the ticket revenue, and we know that that's somewhat loosely synchronized to the team performance. So, I think the local media hits can be, you can kind of roll with those punches, somewhat irrespective of the competitive cycle that's linked to ticket revenue and other things. But, having to deal with them both at the same time has been no fun. It just so happens that we're in this mode on the baseball side of focusing on the young players, compiling talent, stockpiling it, honestly. And again, Chaim's done a great job in pushing on that strategy, and we're pretty far along this offseason, and he's sort of accomplished a lot of what he set out to do already. But I'm digressing from your question. I'm not quite sure if it's really answerable, that one.